Thanks for joining us for Season 5 of the Service to School Stories podcast. I'm Sydney Mathis, your host and Chief Program Officer at Service to School. This season, we wanted to highlight some of our incredible alumni and dive deeper into their stories. You'll hear from a variety of student veterans about their journey from the military through the admissions process and onto campus. Guests will share how they overcame challenges, and we'll look back on their journey to give some advice along the way. Let's kick it off. All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Service to School Stories podcast. Today, I am joined by our guest, David. David is a current law student at William & Mary. He was a former Service to School applicant and is going to share a little bit with us about his journey from the Naval Academy now to William & Mary. So, David, thanks for being here. Can you share a little bit about your background with our listeners?
Hi, Sydney. Yeah, sure. Thank you. And thank you very much for having me. So yeah, as you kind of mentioned, I graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy in 2011, commissioned, and was a U.S. Naval Aviator for approximately 10 years for the MH-60 Romeo. And my last tour was actually, I was a ROTC instructor at UNC in Duke in North Carolina. And while there, I met my now wife, and she was a surgical resident. And funny enough that the Navy paid for her med school, so as I was getting ready to leave the Navy, she was actually entering it. So we were expecting that. But then the little unexpected surprise was her first assignment was Okinawa, Japan. So about 2 weeks after we got married, we moved to Okinawa, Japan, and I was no longer employed. And I was trying to find a job. I was able to find a remote role for about a year, but working overseas, as a lot of other military spouses can attest to, is definitely difficult to maintain work. So after a year, I was unfortunately laid off. And then during that time, got into scuba diving, really enjoyed like the local culture, but I was looking forward to what I want to do when I get back. And I've always wanted to do law school. It's always been something in the back of my mind, but I just never really had time to fit it in, basically, or like just with life going from the Navy and then moving to Japan. So while in Okinawa, I started studying for the LSAT, and my wife had an idea of where she was going to end up for her next assignment. So I applied to one law school only, which is William & Mary. And fortunately, I got in. It was a little bit of a rocky admissions process, which we can talk more about. But so I took the LSAT over in Japan, applied, got in, and I finished up my first year. And now this past week, I started my second year, so I'm a 2L. And so I interned at an aviation insurance defense company this summer in New York City. And I'm excited to talk about my experience with the listeners. I've also been a service to school ambassador for multiple undergrads as well. So definitely a great program, but it was nice being on the receiving end of help also during the admissions process. And now I'm an ambassador for law school admissions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of follow-up questions that I have.
Yeah, sure.
So at what point did you decide, okay, we moved to Okinawa. You said you'd always had an interest in going to law school, but what was it that kind of sparked that interest in law?
Yeah, like I said, I've always had an interest, but law, unlike, I also have an MBA I earned at UNC, and law school, there are some part-time programs out there, but they take like 4 years-ish, whereas I did a part-time MBA in the evenings. So I just couldn't fit law school in while still being active duty, basically, in that time frame. So then when I was unemployed in Okinawa and realized like, hey, this is like my chance, like when we get back to the United States, like this is my one chance to probably be able to do this, because basically my civilian career never really got started after we moved to Japan. I would have... The company that I was working for, Fortune like 100 company, but I would have had to reapply externally just to come back in. And so I was like, well, I haven't really started my civilian career yet. So if I want to take some time off to go to law school, this is the perfect chance. And it's always been in the back of my mind an interest. And so I finally made it a reality.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit. So when you got your MBA at UNC, did you take the GRE or the GMAT?
I didn't actually take either. I was an evening applicant.
Nice.
And they did the waiver. I was actually on deployment when I applied, so I don't know if that's why they gave me a waiver or not, but it was definitely nice. Which made it which then taking the LSAT was a whole different beast.
That's what I was gonna ask. Was like, what was the difference between the two?
Well, I mean, I kind of looked at the GRE and GMAT stuff, but the LSAT is a completely different test than I've ever taken before, and it
Hmm.
definitely requires a lot of preparation, more than I was actually expecting. And
Hmm.
that was probably the hardest part of the admissions process because by the time I decided to apply to William and Mary, it was late summer of what 2021, yeah, or I'm sorry, 2022, and I only had a few opportunities to take the LSAT before the admission cycle ended.
Hmm.
And I've come to find out a lot of people spend about a year studying for that test, where I compressed my studying into about 3 months, which the study program I use, like you could outline like your like timeline to take the test, and it's like we do not advise that you do this
Like
path
abort
because
mission.
yeah, they were like, I used 7 stage, and they're like, for your own sanity, we recommend a little bit longer. But that's kind of what I put myself into, and I scraped by. It wasn't pretty, but yeah,
Yeah. So you decided based on where your wife was coming back to the States where she was getting that next assignment from William and Mary, right?
correct, yes.
Talk to us a little bit about maybe the difference in campus between William and Mary and UNC and kind of what you think is important for students when they're kind of thinking about where they want to apply, because I want to also acknowledge that it's really important that sometimes the decision isn't necessarily driven by like name of school or ranking or prestige, right? Like sometimes there's a lot of other factors that go into the schools that students apply to. So talk with us a little bit about that.
Absolutely, for sure. So, first part of your question, the difference between UNC and William and Mary, both beautiful campuses, both very old Southern state schools, actually. William and Mary is like one of the first schools in the country, actually, the first law school in the country for sure. And then UNC is one of the first public schools. So, both campuses have a lot of tradition, very pretty. The law school, there's also a law school at UNC, which I did not attend, but it's kind of funny. Both of them, the law schools are kind of separated from the main campus. So my day to day on the main campus is I don't really see it. um, but when it comes to like deciding on what schools, I think, especially for a lot of people that be listening to this podcast, it doesn't necessarily come down to ranking and everything like that. It's like, well, your family situation. So, I mean,
Mhm.
my wife is working in Norfolk here as a doctor at the Naval Hospital. So I basically had two options. It was either here or there's actually another school in Virginia Beach, Regents, but I didn't apply to that one because you kind of hit on it a little bit. And the one difference between, I'd say, law school and maybe MBAs is ranking, depending on what you want to do, rankings do sometimes count. That's one thing I wish I knew a little bit more going into the legal field. William Mary is a very well ranked school. I'm very happy there. But I've discovered if you want certain positions, it really depends on what school you go to. And the rankings sometimes, unfortunately, do play heavily in the law field still. You can definitely
Mhm.
fight it, but you also need to have the good grades then. So that's the one thing I did not know as well going into law school about how much the rankings actually matter, depending on what you want to do.
Yeah, sure. And then kind of following up on that with what you want to do, has your time in service or any of the experience leading up to influenced the type of law that you think you might want to go into?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was an aviator in the Navy, and I really enjoyed aviation a lot. I just never really wanted to be an airline pilot or anything like after the Navy, but I still enjoyed my aviation background, and I was also an engineering undergrad. And I was very fortunate and found a very niche firm that deals with aviation related matters. So aviation mishaps, crashes, and stuff like that.
So they're
So
really popular with Boeing right now, right?
actually, no, not Boeing, but another big defense contractor. So yeah, so it was a very good fit for me. Most of the partners there are former engineers, and a lot of the some of the partners have aviation backgrounds as well. So, there are niche fields out there, especially for non-traditional students that have a prior working career. But then also, if you don't know what you want to do in law school, that's also fine. Like, if you want to go work in a big law firm, there's definitely lots of different practice groups that you can get a lot of experience at, or you can go to like a smaller field that you want to into after law school, or there's a whole different realm of like public service as well, working through the government or local nonprofits.
Yeah, and talk with our listeners a little bit. You mentioned you had a summer internship. How did you find that, and what was that like?
Yeah, so I was actually in a very fortunate position. I'm not a big active user on LinkedIn, but I maintain a basic profile. And the managing partner from the firm, I guess, somehow found me on there and messaged me. And
Wow.
yeah, so it was kind of a little unusual to the point. Most of the time I get messages on LinkedIn, I just kind of delete them because they're like from recruiters or junk or whatnot. So I
Hmm.
almost deleted it, and then I reread it. I'm like, oh, this looks like a person actually wrote it. And so then we engaged in a few conversations, and then he interviewed me, and then he did another. There was a second round of interviews with another partner and another associate attorney from the firm, and then they offered me a summer position there. So I was very fortunate in that regard. So once again, the prior work experience definitely paid off, and I didn't even have any grades at that point. That was during my first semester, the fall semester, of my first year. That all happened.
Yeah. So a follow-up question on that. How many of your classmates do you feel have prior work experience?
That's a good question. I don't know the stat off the top of my head, but I'd say about a fifth, or a fourth to a fifth. I'd say have at least 1 to 2 years after undergrad. There are some people. There are a lot that go. They call them K through JDs, kindergarten through JD. But there are definitely. It's not uncommon also to have a few years of working, and it seems like a lot of my like classmates that did work, they worked in either like some type of like government position or in like a political campaign or a nonprofit or a paralegal. There's a lot of former paralegals as well that do a couple years of that and then come to law school. So it's definitely not uncommon to have prior working experience. I just don't know
Mhm.
the number off the top of my head of how
Sure.
many.
Yeah, no worries. And kind of that same question, how many of your classmates do you feel are kind of at the same place in life as you, right? You are expecting another little child,
I
right?
yeah. Yeah.
So, and then you have a spouse. So how does the kind of the family dynamic translate into the classroom or
Yeah.
your classmates?
I mean, there are a lot of like straight out of undergrad students at the school. It's definitely a majority, and I'd say the non-traditional are a minority, but a strong minority at that. There are definitely a lot of prior military at William and Mary. William and Mary has been very pro-military, and they're trying to increase the number of veterans or active duty in their class size every year. And most of the prior military or those non-traditional backgrounds do have families or children, and so it's not uncommon. And then there's also some people that come to law school like after they've done or retired, done 20 years. One of the professors at William and Mary, he was a retired Marine Corps colonel, did like almost 30 years in the Marine Corps, and then retired, went to law school, and then did another 10 years working for, I believe, Department of Justice. And now he's back as a professor. So it's definitely not uncommon to be an older student in law school, but you definitely won't be the majority, that's for sure.
Sure. And how do you juggle those competing priorities?
Yeah, it's not easy. I live about a little over an hour away from the school, so just because my wife is a physician and needs to be closer to the hospital,
Mhm.
and so we, like you said, we have one child and another on the way, so we have to be very thorough with our weekly planning. And we don't have anything like formal, but we have a family calendar, and we just kind of plan out the week and making sure there's always somebody covering childcare or picking up, dropping off at daycare. We had a nanny the first year, but we were able to get our daughter into daycare this past year, and so it's very thoughtful and managed like ahead of time. So the one thing
Mhm.
I'm learning this year, I'm on a journal, for instance, the law
Mhm.
school, is when things pop up with short due dates, it can create a little bit of havoc for my family just because I chart everything out very thoroughly, and short notice items are kind of painful. So with
Yeah.
that, I did limit the amount of extracurriculars I do, just because I have a family and I also have prior work experience. So I just don't have the time to like devote a lot of time to extracurriculars. Whereas
Yeah.
I am the president of the Veterans and Military Law Society, but
Hmm.
once again, it's a bunch of non-traditional veterans and active duty students, so that's a relatively low time commitment compared to some of the other extracurriculars.
Sure. Probably not a lot of scuba diving going on in the Norfolk area,
No,
right?
I would. I
At least
wish.
you might not want to swim in that water.
No, no.
So, okay, I know you had mentioned before that you had kind of like a rough go at the admissions
Yeah.
process in applying to William and Mary. So, tell us the real story
Yeah.
of your admission cycle.
So admissions to law school was definitely a lot more challenging than I expected. So the MBA process was very smooth, and I actually did it while deployed. But compared to law school, it's definitely a different beast. So the LSAT, very difficult test, and then when it comes down to going to an American Bar Association, ABA school, the big thing it seems like admissions cares about is your undergrad GPA and your
Mhm.
LSAT score.
Yep.
Um, and you could be out of undergrad for 10 plus years like myself, but your undergrad GPA is still like critical. And if you already have a master's degree, it doesn't really get factored. Your GPA from that doesn't really get factored in at all into the admissions criteria because it's not reported. So my undergrad GPA out of the Naval Academy as an engineer wasn't stellar. It was pretty average for the Naval Academy. And then my LSAT score also, with like I talked about the compressed timeline, was okay, but it was definitely on the lower end of William and Mary's LSAT median range. And typically, it's kind of like undergrad. If you have a low GPA, you need to, in high school, you need to balance it out with a high SAT. Same with law school. If you have a low undergrad GPA, you want to balance it out with a higher LSAT. Where for me, both of them were kind of low, but I was kind of banking on having 10 plus years of work experience, a master's degree. I was a prior aviator, and wrote a strong personal statement. And I was initially rejected, which kind of stung. It stung a lot,
Mhm.
actually. I didn't think it was a slam dunk, but I thought maybe at least a wait list, and I didn't even get that. So I was initially rejected, and so I was still living in Japan at the time, and about a month after I got rejected, I actually had to fly back and bring my dog back to the States. So I traveled and then closed on our house. And when I was back in the Virginia area, I emailed it was a new dean of admissions at William and Mary. I was like, and asked to meet with her and just talk about what I can do different for next year.
Mhm.
And so she was very receptive, very great dean, Deanie. So she's awesome and very pro-military. And she met with me, and we had a great discussion about what she's looking for. And I kind of reiterated some of the things here. Once again, really get that LSAT score up high. The undergrad GPA, you can't do anything about that,
Yep.
especially 10 years after the fact.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah, maybe you can submit like a low GPA addendum, which a lot of law schools accept. Which I wrote one, which was kind of weird for me, discussing like why I didn't do very good in statics and dynamics class 14 years ago. But I submitted that, and then she didn't make any promises or anything like that, but she said, "Let me see what I can do." And several months later, I got an email. It was in the middle of the night because I was in Japan, and it was like, "Hey, if we had a spot open up, so if you're still interested, we can get you in this year." And I
Mm.
was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So I paid my seat deposit that day and rearranged our whole trip because we were supposed to come home in late August. And I was like, "Well, law school starts like the beginning of August," so we rebooked our flights, and I arrived back in the United States on a Saturday, and school started Monday.
Yeah. So, what part of that conversation with the dean there was it ever like, this cycle is still an option versus, like you said, initially going in there, you're kind of like, what can I do for next cycle?
Right. I mean, so it was in the middle of the summer, and they sent out all their initial acceptances, I guess, already, probably, and then you kind of see what their return rate and stuff like that is, and
Yep.
it stuff moves around, and as people get off wait lists and stuff like that, I believe students, numbers move and stuff like that. So,
Hmm.
um, she did say to me, "Hey, it's okay," and a couple other deans of admissions I've talked to, like, it's a long summer and a lot of stuff can happen, so keep your head up. And
Hmm.
so people that do get waitlisted to other schools as well, don't hang your head because like I found out, and a few other people I know now have been waitlisted and they've gotten in the late summer to their dream school. So it's definitely
Yeah,
a possibility. And my other piece of advice is, definitely reach out to the admissions office and let them know you're still interested.
absolutely.
And also, as a veteran, the best thing you can do is kind of sell your story and be like, once again, like reiterate like why you want to go to law school and why you will succeed here. Like, and that's kind of what I tried to like bring across in the meeting with her. Like, I definitely, this wasn't just like a whim, like oh, this would be cool because it is a 3-year investment and it's not
Hmm.
easy. It's very stressful a lot of times.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's something I really wanted. And so the big thing when you're dealing with admissions staff across the country at any law school is you need to make it very clear, like, this is what you want, and you're ready to commit the 3 years and be a
Hmm.
lawyer and pass a bar exam and then have a career in law.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you touched on such an important part of the admissions process that typically happens behind closed doors is the waitlist process. And I mean, your situation's certainly unique to be denied and then admitted. Like typically the waitlist, we're kind of like massaging it and moving it through as students are, being pulled off at other schools. And very rarely, when admissions officers are looking to fill opening seats, are they going to the students who were denied, right? But smart
Right.
on you to go and re-emphasize your interest, telling them like this is literally the only school that I'm applying to that I'm
Okay.
interested in coming to and making that case because when they're now looking to admit a student off of a wait list or in your situation a denied pile, that's a student that you typically don't pull a student off a wait list if you're like uneasy if they're going to attend, right? Because now
Right.
you don't want to switch them to an admit and now they're like a turn down, right? Like it's kind
Exactly.
of all a numbers thing. They have to report all these like acceptance rates and these yield rates, right? So
Yes.
the more that you can make that case for why, this is the school that I'm coming to if I'm admitted, this is why it's important for me to be a student on your campus, it just gives them more of a reason to give you that second look when they're trying to fill those spaces. And then also, like the wait list typically isn't ranked. And if a veteran says no, well, they're typically going to fill that spot with another veteran. So you're in a really good position to, submit that letter of continued interest, go and talk with them, make that case. Because like you said, that list is fluid. It is moving through the summer
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely. There's
process.
a lot of shift. And once again,
Yeah.
yeah, because other students are getting to other school, like you said. And so just keep, let them know you're interested and advocate and be the best advocate for yourself as well.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
on top of that, if you happen to like succeed in getting off the wait list until you're like school, be careful of imposter syndrome. I kind of felt that initially it's very common for a lot of people in law school, no matter even if you got like admitted as a number one, like admit like there's a lot of imposter syndrome in law school, but once again, the schools they're not going to let you in if they don't think you're going to succeed
You
at the
can
school.
succeed there. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. How do you kind of work through that imposter syndrome?
That's a so honestly, I just did what I know best and just study and work hard, and I kind of just like um I don't enjoy some law school could be a little bit competitive with the curve. There's a grade curved grading system and all that, but I don't really talk to the students about their grades. I don't want to know. I just focus on myself and just work hard and do the best that I can. And I treat it like a job. Definitely putting in the hours that's required
Mhm.
and yeah, I don't have any like specific thing besides just knowing like I earned my spot here and
Yeah.
just putting all my effort into it.
Putting the work in. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then, so you've given a lot of advice about the admissions process. And you mentioned you're an undergraduate ambassador and you've worked with students on the law school side. What would you say is kind of like the question you hear the most from students that you're paired with?
For law school or undergrad?
Let's do both.
It's typically their personal statement essays, like what do I write? And for law school, it's generally most schools are pretty open-ended, like it's just a personal statement. And so the advice I always give is like, what do you want the admissions committee to know about you, and why will you succeed here, and why are you ready to commit to 3 years of being a lawyer? I was actually at a service to school event, and the a Harvard Associate Dean of Admissions was there, and she was saying a lot of the essay personal statement she reads talks about watching Law and Order, and apparently that's not a good way to win over the admissions council to say like I like watching legal dramas. Like
Yeah.
once again, like why do you want to be a lawyer? Like why do you want to take this time commitment? Not because it looks cool on TV.
Mhm.
Because in all honesty, it's not that exciting a lot of the times. So that's definitely like how you really need to stand out is like why me? Why do I want this? On the undergraduate side, same thing. definitely essays and trying to convey, like, especially for service to school applicants, a lot of the service to school applicants on the undergraduate side are definitely non-traditional and either have
Mhm.
prior attended college and it didn't work out and went to the military and are trying to come again. And they feel this kind of like shame, like I didn't do well the first time. And I always say that's a point of strength now. Like you can show like, hey, I realize I was immature, I didn't work hard, and I went to the military, matured, and now I'm ready to come back because I know this is what I want. So once again, identifying your weaknesses and using that as a strength to say, I'm ready to succeed. Like I know what I did wrong and I fixed it and I'm ready to move on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Like the personal statement is truly, I always to say, you've got to take it beyond, I want to make money or I want to, like something that someone else can say.
Right.
And there's a lot that comes from military experiences that other traditional applicants can't say. Right. So even if it's like a specific military example, or even if it's like a period of personal growth while you're in the military that you can speak to directly, those are stories that just a very small percentage of the applicant pool, law school, undergrad, med school, whatever, degree you're seeking, it's a very small applicant pool.
It is.
So finding that story for sure, is just incredibly
It
important.
is. And once again, you just want to, I don't want to say sell yourself, but to convey why you are like the best person for this like one seat. Like
Mhm.
convey your experiences and what drove you to join, like wanting to go to law school or medical school. Because like, yeah, like we kind of touched on like saying I like watching medical dramas or like Grey's, like
Yeah.
it, it shows immaturity almost. And whereas like, it's like, when I served in the military, I always admired like what the corpsmen or the doctors are doing, and I saw something that and I want to help or something like that. Like you
Mhm.
just need to sell like what your inner motivation is. And yeah, don't mention money.
Yeah. Don't mention money. Or Grey's Anatomy, or Suits, or Law and Order,
Yeah.
like you said, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's try and take it a little bit deeper. We spend a lot of time working on essays with applicants, and that's kind of always some of the feedback is like, can we take this a step deeper and beyond
And
maybe like surface level?
And sometimes when there's a 500 word limit, it's hard. It's hard to take it
Mhm.
deeper without getting, because you also need to make the point at the end. You need to dive into why. But so that's some of the issues I'm seeing now with applicants that I'm helping is like, we have a 500 word limit. How do you convey what caused your desire within 500 words and then kind of bridge it at the end? And that's where I think the service to school ambassadors can really help you. Because once again, we've all, as an ambassador, we've been through this process. Especially if we're like been in school recently or just out of school, like we're in a writing mode and we can definitely help guide you on that point for the personal statement. But yeah, like we touched on just getting the reason why initially, and then we can like refine the essay down to make it more powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, David, as we begin to wrap up the conversation, what is next for you? I know you're starting your 2L year,
Yeah.
but where do you kind of see this law school path taking you?
Yeah, so I'm going back to the same firm that I interned with in New York City this coming summer. I really enjoyed the work. They just messaged me back the other day. Actually, one of the first matters that I worked on settled and it was a success. So that was kind of cool to see like my work,
Congrats.
thanks, kind of like come to fruition. But yeah, going back there and then. We have a final year. I definitely enjoyed working again, being out in the work environment. School is definitely nice. It's kind of a break, but at the same time, I do enjoy being back in like a working environment. So looking forward to
Mhm.
that summer and then graduating and then hopefully working there full time. So
Yeah. Or will you all stick around that geographic area, or will she
um,
move again?
it's looking like we might be moving to the Raleigh area based on my wife's
Okay.
upcoming job, but
Yeah.
the nice thing about legal careers now is a lot of it can be done remotely. So
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, we wish you and your family all the best, especially with the new edition coming up. But we can't thank you enough, honestly, too, for spending time with us today on the podcast, but also supporting applicants as an ambassador. As the organization continues to grow, our ambassadors are truly how we're able to do the work. And we thank you all so much for volunteering your time, your effort, your
awesome.
expertise. Couldn't do this work without you all. So, David, thanks again for being here with us today.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
That's all we have for this episode. Join us next week, same time, same place, where we share more service to school stories. Service to School Stories is hosted by Sydney Mathis, Chief Program Officer, and Alec Emmert, Service to School CEO. Our podcast is produced and edited by our Director of Communication, Amanda Tobias. Service to School is a 501c3 nonprofit providing free college admission support to transitioning service members and veterans. Join us next week and follow us for more on your favorite social media platforms.